We're looking at some news events, well, not just happening in Australia, but affecting Australians in particular. Our Aussie correspondent, Craig Heilmann, joins us. Craig, g'day. Thanks very much for being on the program today.
Sure, Andrew. Great to see you, mate.
Now, the first story. Now, none of these stories is particularly good news. That's the nature of news to an extent. But this first one, particularly tragic, and it's not set in Australia, although it does involve an Australian citizen. The awful situation which continues to unfold in Gaza. Now, there's been significant collateral damage on what has happened there in terms of innocent civilians, but with aid workers, their entire convoy being wiped out, including an Australian citizen. This has really hit the headlines. It's heartbreaking, but some pretty angry people with this as well.
Yeah, this one's not a good one for the Israelis in Australia. The Jewish community's already been under a lot of threat, and now our Prime Minister is a real left-wing Prime Minister, but has tried to play a centrist because that's where the votes are. But his instincts are all anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian, and this has allowed him to sort of raise, to rear all that. And the Israelis screwed up big time with this episode, and they're already on thin ice anyway. And certainly this gives their enemies in Australia anyway plenty of ammunition, excuse the pun, to go after them. So they did screw up, and I know they own that, and no doubt feel terrible about it. But in this case, they have really screwed up in terms of the Aussie aid worker.
Now, of course, not just Aussie aid workers, with several different nationalities involved, and each one of their ambassadors are sending please explain messages to their Australian ambassadors.
I shouldn't laugh, but it's hard to explain.
Exactly, it is. And honestly, in the fog of war, things happen which are unintended. But given that this has been unfolding for months now, we've seen intentional bombing of hospitals, we've seen a horrific death toll amongst civilians, and in particular children. The aid isn't getting through. There is the likelihood of famine on the horizon. I mean, as you mentioned, the unfortunate unintended consequence of this is, hate towards Israelis who aren't necessarily to blame, hate towards Jewish people in Australia and different parts of the world.
Yeah, and that was already a serious problem anyway, but it just ramps up, and it gives people that are thinking that way anyway an excuse to keep going or to get worse and more serious. But look, this is massive collateral damage. Once the Israelis set the strategic goal of getting rid of Hamas, which was never going to be easy to execute, but once they'd set that goal, they are not going to stop. They're going to keep working it through. But what they're burning is their political capital with everybody else, and even the Americans seem to be ditching them in their own way. So it's a mess, an absolute mess for Israel. Look, I'm sympathetic because I think when 1,200 of your citizens are butchered and brutalized in the way people were, even the corpses were defiled, I think most nation states would not know what to do. Certainly the Israelis are not going to tolerate that given their history. And that's perfectly understandable. But the collateral damage now is what's piling up. And that is a real problem. It's going to be a problem long term.
There is a call for a ceasefire, and it's just the way the calendars have worked this year. The initial call for a ceasefire was around the Ramadan period, and it just so happened that the end of Ramadan and Easter happened to coincide this year. It doesn't happen every year, but happened to do so this year. I also understand that there's a certain Muslim cleric who, again, in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, calling for some pretty hate-filled responses from the Muslim community.
Yeah, so he's a very fiery gentleman who preaches in a mosque in Bankstown in Sydney. And the what we're learning about the New South Wales Police is there is apparently no, even though we have hate crime laws and all the rest of it, there is nothing you can say if you're a Muslim that's going to get you jailed. They just simply don't want to run that gauntlet. I suspect, I mean, I may be being cynical, but I suspect if it were Christians saying anything like this kind of stuff. So let me give you an example, Andrew, of the sorts of things that are being said. This is a gentleman who said basically the worshippers of Allah should be prayers at night. They should be worshippers at night and warriors during the day. Now, this is being preached in Bankstown in Sydney, not in Palestine. One of his other sermons, he said, if there were any Muslims harmed anywhere in the world, being killed or oppressed at the hands of the worshippers of cows, rats and monkeys, I presume that's us. I don't know who else he's talking about, maybe Jewish people as well. he basically says, "Be prepared to meet men who love death more than you love life." Look, the police have said nothing we can do about this. No crime has been committed. I just wonder whether, if this was emerging out of any other group in society, whether it would be allowed to go on.
I think even the Free Speech Union, who basically say, hey, free speech to people you don't like, but
Yep.
when you cross that line and go, let's encourage people to commit acts of violence
Yep.
against other people in a way which is encouraging people along those lines, that crosses a line. That freedom of speech applies, but not when you're asking people to kill others.
It's crazy, Andrew, because you can get arrested in England for praying outside an abortion clinic. I mean, there was a lady, hundreds of meters away from an abortion clinic, other side of the road, praying outside of it, not saying anything verbally at all, but just quietly praying in her own head, and she got arrested. It's amazing what some people can do that gets them arrested, and it's amazing what others can do that doesn't get them arrested.
Yeah.
But look, I'm not for hate speech laws, by the way. I'm much more with the Free Speech Union. I think better that we're allowed to say what's going on in our heads than not. But I do think this is extreme rhetoric, and look, probably for you and I, not necessarily scary, but I imagine for a lot of Australians and Kiwis would be quite scary.
Now, hey, here in New Zealand, people get arrested for painting over rainbows. Which again, I'm not advocating as a way of Christian witness. Vandalism isn't top of my list, but also people saying, oh well, these types of Christians, they should be. We'll just call them a gang, and then we'll ban them like we're going to ban the gangs. Seems to be things around the wrong way in that regard. However, it seems that there may be, and look, this is the way things are in various parts of the world. If you do a good job as a politician, if you make significant donations to the political party who happens to be in power at the time, then it's jobs for the boys. It's looking after your mates. It is the old boys club, and the latest old boy, I suppose, has just been made Governor General.
Yeah, it's an old girl. Sam Mostyn, who's an ex-political staffer for the Labor Party, and it's amazing because our GG, our Governor General, I say GG, it sounds like you're in a horse race, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But our Governor General is not supposed to be political. It's supposed to be, this is the person that the King's representative in Australia, so non-political, sits above the political fray. But we've got an ex-Labor Party staffer with extreme views, and even the Prime Minister, when honouring this lady and saying let's celebrate, this is our second female, only our second female, but our new Governor General called her an activist. She's definitely an activist, not just on radical feminist issues. Yeah. What's upsetting the Australian community at the moment is having voted down The Voice some time ago, the Voice referendum, she has referred to Australia Day as Invasion Day. And that is not usually the sort of person you're going to choose as your Governor General. But again, it just shows you the ideological strife that we are in at the moment.
This is somebody who's the representative of the Crown. That seems.
Well, she can look. In reality, she can fire the government, right? I mean, our Governor General in the 1970s fired Gough Whitlam's government. Power they've got. If you want to form a government, you got to go see cap in hand the Governor General and get her to sign off on it. Yeah. So this is not a person you want to be political, but unfortunately, that's what we've got.
Although, yes, the Gough Whitlam government being a bit of an aberration, not likely to happen again. I think Australia learned the lesson the hard way in that regard. Is there any actual political power, or is this, hey, you turn up to event openings, you get to wear a funny outfit, and possibly get to hang out with celebrities at the actual horse races?
That's it. It's a lot of hat wearing and eating pavlova, isn't it? I mean, it's nothing particularly powerful about the role. But that's probably why you don't need a politician in it. It's supposed to be someone that everybody could like.
Exactly.
I don't doubt this is a very talented lady and works very hard and all the rest of it. But she certainly has extreme political views down one direction, and that's typically not the person we choose for our Governor General. But I think it says to us again that the type of situation we're in, Andrew, in most of our nation states, New Zealand, Australia, whatever, everything has become political. There's very little that isn't touched by politics.
Exactly.
Now.
I mean, the only thing I could think which would be worse than that is to have somebody who's an out-and-out Republican as the representative of
well, she probably is a Republican, by the way, I would think.
Does King Charles get a say
I don't know how that works, but it works. It's like the people that receive knighthoods who are Republicans. I mean, what are they doing?
Yeah, exactly. Does King Charles get a veto on this, do you think? He says, nah, not
I
having that one.
don't think that's allowed. I mean, this is one of the throwbacks of the strange system of being an ex-colony, isn't it? That
Yeah.
we still report to the king in some notional sense. Of course, we don't, but
Yeah, exactly.
it doesn't. Yeah, it's a weird system. You know it better than I do.
And hey, if the job involves wearing hats and eating pavlovas, where do I sign? But Craig,
And you get a big paycheck too.
do you? Oh well, hey, that's even better. Craig, appreciate your wisdom and insight as always. Fun times in the lucky country. Thanks for being on the program today.
God bless, my brother. Look after yourself.